I want to begin by telling you a story about a friend of mine named Liz. The story takes place in the early 1980s in the horse country of Corona, California. Liz was 21 years old. She had two young children. Her son Michael was almost 3 years old, and she had a newborn daughter. And they'd moved out to Corona because they wanted to be closer to her husband's family. And when they got there, they moved into this little shack on this very massive property because it was all they could afford. And right near this shack was an abandoned guest house. And outside of this guest house was a cement pond. And it was kind of shaped like a bowl. Well, one day, she and her family and friends, they decided that they were going to clean this pond out to be able to swim inside of it. And when they were doing it, all the little kids who lived on the property, they were riding their big wheels kind of up and down the cement sides of the pond. And this is the day that Michael, her son, became very infatuated with the pond. He was always wandering over to it, so they'd have to watch him and make sure he was okay. Well, one day, Liz's husband decides that he wants to get a new car. So they drop off the kids at a family friend's house. And they go out and they say it's going to take a couple hours and then we'll be back home. But a couple of hours turns into all day. And by the time they get back, Liz's daughter, she really needs to nurse. So she sits down and she's feeding her daughter and she says, "Hey, can you just watch Michael? He's been cooped up all day." So Michael was kind of playing around outside, but her husband decides he wants to call his friends and family and tell them about this new car that he's bought. So he's talking on the phone and he's kind of looking out the window at the same time. And Liz says, "Can you see Michael? Is he okay?" And he's like, yeah, no, he's fine. I can see him. He's right there. And then a few minutes go by and she noticed that her husband is kind of distracted. And she asks him again, she says, "Hey, can you see Michael? Is he out there?" And he looks and Michael's gone. And so she says, "Well, go look for him, go find him." So he hangs up the phone, he goes out, he starts looking, and when her husband doesn't come back in a few minutes, she decides, you know what, I need to go out. So she puts down her baby and then she ends up going directly out to the pond because that's what her intuition tells her. That's where he's gonna be. So she gets there and he's nowhere to be seen. And then she goes over to the ledge and she looks down and there he is at the bottom of the pond. And so she jumps in, she goes down, she grabs him, pulls him back up, gets him to the surface, and she starts screaming for her husband to come over. And he comes over and they're able to get him out of the pond. And there's a teenager who lives on the property and he makes his way down and he starts doing CPR on Michael immediately. And they call an ambulance, but the ambulance isn't coming because they're in the middle of nowhere. So they decide to throw Michael into the back of this truck and they drive him to the hospital. And this teenager is doing CPR on him the whole way there for an hour and a half. And when they get to the hospital, the doctors, they take him in and they put him into a chemical-induced coma and they say, "You know what? We don't know if Michael's gonna make it or not." Well, amazingly, Michael survives. And yes, he has some brain damage, but thanks to the tireless efforts of Liz, working with him, rehabilitating his motor skills and his speech, he actually is relatively normal given everything that happened to him. Now, when I talk to Liz about this day, what she often tells me is that her biggest regret is that she didn't trust her intuition, that she couldn't rely upon her husband to watch Michael. If she could go back in time, what she would do is the moment he got on the phone, she would just pick up her daughter, go outside and watch him herself. And today, some 40 years after this accident, Michael, who doesn't fully understand the circumstances surrounding that day, he blames Liz, his mother, for this accident, when in reality, she is the one who saved him. And so what I want to talk about today is the concept of regret, how the action or inaction of a single moment can plague us for the rest of our lives. We're going to talk about when regret is good for us, when it's bad, and how regret shapes our lives. And to begin this, I want to introduce you to somebody who spends a lot of time talking to people who struggle with regret. Will you join me in the kitchen?